Hello there, and welcome to another top 10 differences video. This time I'm doing it on the top 10 differences between the TLR Mini B and the Team Losi Mini JrX2. Both of these cars are scaled down versions of 10 scale cars. The JrX2, Mini JrX2, of course, being a scaled down version of Team Losi's first car, the JrX2, which originally came to market all the way back in 1988 and was intended to be the team associated RC10 killer. And I believe it was. So to give you an idea, like, these are 16th scale cars. This is a 1/16 scale version of the original JrX2 110, which was a 1/10 scale version. So let's have a look at that before we dive into comparing these two, because I just happen to have here a JrX2. So this is a 1/10 scale car, and this is the Mini JrX2, which is a 1/16 scale version of this. And I have to tell you, they did a fantastic job being true to this car. There's literally, off the top of my head, only one difference. Never mind electronics, but as far as the features that were on this car and the features that are on this car, everything is the same with one exception, and we'll cover that under the honorable mentions section after the top 10 differences. So that gives you an idea of where this thing came from, its grandpappy, its heritage. This is the original car from Team Losi, the JrX2. And this is a 16 scale version of that. So now that you know where this came from, you'll understand why it is so different from the Mini B. Let's get into it and talk about what those differences are. So number one on our list of top 10 differences, easy for me to say, between the Mini JrX2 and the Mini JrX or the Mini B is the bodies and the wings. So back in the day, an old school car did not have what we refer to as a cab forward body design. So if you look at the body of the JrX2 or the Mini B here on my right, look where the windshield is. Look how close the windshield is to the front shock tower. So that would be the cab where the driver would sit if this was a full scale car. So the modern cars with mid-motor designs started to use cab forward bodies. So the cab forward acts as an opportunity for downforce. So as the car is going down the track, the wind is pushing on the front of the cab, giving you downforce, giving you more steering. Some companies like J Concepts have really taken that cab forward design to the next level and made this higher and wider to produce more surface area, more weight in the front of the car, more forward weight bias, and as a result, that downward force is giving the car more steering. The old school bodies, that wasn't a thing. So the cab is towards the back, frankly much more realistic, because these were the RC10, the original RC10, very scale in appearance. The JrX2 started to go away from that, and they didn't quite look like something you would see out in the Baja Desert. Next, wings. So the original JrX2 had a wing that just pulled up. Let me show you. The wing on the RC10 and the early cars, the Losi cars, the wing just removed like that, and then you took the body off. So that's one, well, that's two things that the Mini JrX2 did not quite stay true to. The wing on the Mini JrX2 is actually attached to the body. It's got the wing wires, but they're not real. The wing wires just go into a piece of plastic inside the body shell, and they stay attached to the body. It's an improvement, frankly, because those wings used to come off, or when you would have a crash, the wing would come off, you'd lose your wing, you'd lose some downforce, and you'd lose some retraction. So the wing on the Mini JrX2 and the body one unit. This car, of course, is modeled off of the modern TLR 22 series of cars. It is like the JrX2. They did a real good job of keeping it true to scale and a good representation and recreation of the 10 scale version of this car. The wing is attached to the shock tower through a mount, and again is bolted in place. So on a 10 scale car, a lot of crashes, these get scrapped instead of coming off, but it's a small price to pay for the added performance. All right, so I'm going to take this body off too, because moving forward, the things that we're going to compare after wheels and tires are going to be inside. All right, next, the JrX2, Mini JrX2 comes with a replica old school tires. So ribbed front tires and just knobbies or spikes. And you can see mine are worn down quite a bit. I've never driven this on pave. I've only driven it on my own personal backyard track while I still had it. So these tires nowadays, you'd never see these on a modern track, especially a modern clay track. They just would not bite into the surface. They would slip over the surface of the clay. The clay tracks now are sealed, which is ridiculous. But anyway, spike knob tires, thing of the past. They will not work on those track surfaces. So we have something like this. I believe the name for this tire is the BK bar tire. So the TLR Mini B comes with clay tires. Yeah, BK bar written right on the side. Lousy. And the front tires, also a clay tire. Taper pin, something like that, doesn't matter. Mini B, clay tires. Mini JrX2, old school dirt tires, ribs, knobs, spikes. All right, next, so now we're on to number 3, and that is the front suspension arms. A lot of differences here. Biggest, most important difference is the Mini JrX2 has what we would call, even today in modern racing, flat arms. There's no curve, there's no bend, it's just simply a flat arm. If I was to take this arm off of the car and lay it on my pit board here, it would lay flat. The Mini B has what's referred to as a gull arm. It has think of a F4U Corsair World War II Warbird airplane. Gull-shaped wing. That may be where this name for the arm comes from. These are known as gull arms, and they produce better steering on high grip tracks. So rather than, like, for example, if I was setting up an outdoor RC10B6, I would want flat arms outside and gull arms inside on carpet, which is how I used to run my B6s. So we got old school flat dirt arms, modern gull arms. Other differences between these two arms, that's it. They both have 2 locations for mounting the shocks so that you can change the geometry and shock angles, so that's fine. But the biggest difference there, difference number 3, front arm suspension, gull arm versus flat arm. Old school loose track, modern high grip track. Next, we're going to look at the rear arms. Big differences here, and that is because the Mini B has what would be known as traditional H-arm style suspension. So the arms typically make the shape of a letter H. So that term was really important when you were distinguishing between the JrX2 style of suspension and the Evolution. Well, Evolution, other cars were using H-arms. Anyhow, so you've got here single arms. It's not multiple links, just one arm attached to a C&D block, and you've got your hub on it, and you got your shock attached directly to the arm itself. Big difference from the Mini JrX2. The Mini JrX2 has what's known as a 5-link rear suspension. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3. Oh, you can't even see that. Sorry. 5-link rear suspension. 1, 2, 3, 4, and the top camber link 5. 5 links to hold that hub to the car. This was quite a bit different from the RC10 that it came out to be its primary competition. The RC10 was the JrX2's primary competition. This suspension, everyone raves about it. It was so good on rough, blown out tracks, etc. and so on. The JrX2 came out in 1989. Shortly thereafter, the JrX2 Performance Kit came out. And what was the Performance Kit? Longer chassis, H-arms, suspension, shock towers, and shocks to go along with that. But this 5-link suspension everybody raves about didn't last a year. Came out in 1988. Performance Kit came out after that. And then the JrX Pro itself came out, which was an H-arm car. So, very cool. Did not last. Reason being, tracks were getting better. And the H-arms were not performing as well, or sorry, the 5-link suspension was not performing as well on groomed tracks compared to the RC10 with its H-arm style of suspension. So Team Losi did away with the 5-link, came out with their own H-arm style cars. Really cool, really unique. 5-link suspension was on the JrX2 and the JrX-T. They also make a Mini JrX-T as well. All right, next on our list here, we're up to number 5, and that is carbon versus plastic. So the Mini JrX2, like its original JrX2, uses a lot of carbon fiber parts. So we have carbon fiber rear shock tower, carbon fiber chassis, carbon fiber front shock tower. None of that, by the way, is interchangeable with the Mini B. I get questions about parts interchangeability. No, it's not a thing. No. They're just two completely different animals. Now, if we look at the Mini B, shock tower is plastic, rear shock tower is plastic. The chassis is not plastic, it's not carbon fiber. It's a combination of aluminum supported by plastic rails, just like modern vehicles. So the old school one, a lot of carbon fiber. The modern one, a lot of polymer. So what do we got next on our list? Number 7, and that is shocks. Okay, let me preface this by saying both of these shocks suck. And the reason why they suck is because none of them have a bleeder hole. Shocks, you fill them with oil, air gets trapped in there. If there's air in your shocks, they do not work correctly. It messes up the dampening. It messes up the amount of travel that the shock will have because there's air trapped in there. So the shaft cannot move its full range of motion. It's awful. Okay? Both of these shocks are, not only do they not have bleeder screws, they're bottom fill. So that means that the bottom of the shock is where the cap is, the part that contains all of the O-rings to seal the shock. So you have to unscrew this bottom cap from the body, fill it with oil, leave it upside down to get the air out, and then slowly work the shaft up and down, wait for the air to come out, screw the cap in, push the shaft. Oh, there's air trapped in there still. Start over. Oh my God. It is the most painful thing in RC car maintenance that I am aware of, that I've experienced, in my opinion. Next difference, well, no differences yet. The differences are that the Mini B, thankfully, is using a collar that is threaded onto the body. So the body itself is threaded, just like the threads of a bolt, and the collar is threaded like a nut, and you can screw that collar up and down. It just rides along the threaded body, and that allows us to change ride height. Not shock, not the rate of the spring. Compressing the spring is not going to change its rate, how hard or soft it is. It's simply going to change the ride height of the car. So when you move that collar up and down, if you move it up, you're lowering your ride height. If you move it down, you are increasing your ride height. So threaded collar, super convenient. The JrX2 here has a shock collar that has a bolt in it, and back in the day these were really cheap. They were too small, there was not enough material, and they would crack where the bolt goes in, and then you'd have to zip tie and do all kinds of weird and wonderful things until you could 6 to 8 weeks get some delivered from Tower Hobbies or something. So they recreated these. They used the same style, same size. No doubt that the material is much better. Also, it helps if you don't, put too many ugga-duggas on that bolt when you tighten it down on the body. So these, because they're not threaded, you're kind of eyeballing, making sure that they're equal when you make adjustments. Rear shock, same thing. Just the cap. These are modern, they're still leaking. There's a bunch of guff down here. Anyway, I haven't done anything to this car. I just threw it on the track as is, right out of the box. Unlike my Mini B that I race, it's well maintained. So, shocks, yeah. Threaded bodies, threaded collars, easier to adjust. Old school. Take a wrench, undo that bolt, move it up and down. Next, antenna. So the Mini B, both of these cars do have an antenna, but modern cars with 2.4 gigahertz transmitters don't use an antenna tube like they did back in the 80s and 90s. So the JrX2 still has an antenna tube, still has an antenna, and it actually protrudes out the body as it would have in the 80s and 90s. The Mini B has an antenna as well, but they hide it down along the side of the chassis rail, running right along the motor wires. If this wasn't 2.4 gigahertz, that would probably be a horrific idea. You'd probably get all kinds of interference from that. Battery placement. We're up to number 9. We're almost done. Battery placement. So in the Mini JrX2, they made the battery compartment, all of this stuff, fit the battery they include with their RTR 16 scale cars. Same battery that would come with the Mini B. All right, and the difference here is the old school cars, the battery ran parallel with the chassis. The new cars, the battery runs perpendicular with the chassis, and that's a pretty good design, because when you put the battery in that way, it allows you to move it forward or back to adjust the weight bias of your car. If you're on a low grip surface, you want to slide that battery all the way back. If you're on a high grip surface, you don't need as much rear traction, you want more steering, you slide the battery forward up towards the front of the compartment. And with this battery that I'm currently using in Mini B, there is a little bit of, it's not quite as wide. So I can actually play with that weight bias. I can move it forward, move it back, depending on how the car is that day on the track. So number 9 was battery placement, perpendicular and parallel with the chassis. Okay, next, the next biggest difference between these two cars, and this is number 10 on our list. I saved the best for last. This is the biggest difference between vintage buggies and modern buggies, and that is rear motor versus mid motor. I'm actually going to put them like this. So in our modern car, because tracks are high bite, lots of traction, the motor has been moved from behind the wheels to in front of the wheels. We call that mid motor. It's not necessarily midway up the chassis, but mid motor, the motor is moved from behind the wheels to in front of the wheels, and that is because we don't need as much rear traction. We need more steering, push everything forward towards the front of the car. Back in the day, this was not the case. Back in the day, we did not have sealed clay tracks. We did not have highly grooved tracks, not grooved, groomed, sorry. And so to get rear traction, we needed rear weight bias. We needed the majority of the weight towards the back of the car. Hence, rear motor. The motor in the rear behind the wheels and tires. Still the biggest difference between old school vintage cars and modern cars. There are very few cars that you can buy today for racing that are rear motor that are not an RTR. For example, Team Associated makes several RTR rear motor vehicles. They make a short course truck and they make a two-wheel drive buggy. And depending on where you are and what your tracks are like, you're better off to get one of those and upgrade the things like the electronics, the suspension components, the shocks, and the differential. They all come, to the best of my knowledge, with a gear diff. Pull that gear diff out, buy a ball diff, and run that on your outdoor untreated track instead of trying to make a mid-motor car work. So unless you have a stand-up gearbox, like a 3-gear or 4-gear stand-up gearbox, that's going to help. Depending on the track, may still not be as good as a rear motor. So number 10, rear motor versus mid motor. And then finally, I have an honorable mention, and it's not really a difference because they both come with it. They put a modern slipper on the JrX2. The original JrX2 and the JrX Pro and the JrXT did not have a slipper. The only thing that you would adjust would be the tension on the differential. And the mini JrX2 doesn't even have the hole on the side of the gearbox for the Allen wrench to go into to adjust the diff. I will show you on the OG. As a matter of fact, I took my JrX2 out for a rip yesterday and had to adjust the diff 3 times before it would stop slipping. So back in the day, you would remove this rubber cap from the side of the gearbox, and there is a hole molded into the side of the case, and an Allen wrench would go in there. You would hold the wheels, hold the spur, and adjust the bolt that goes through the center of the differential to tighten the differential if it was slipping. If you didn't do that, you'd melt your diff. Ask me how I know. So the mini JrX2, they did away with that. It's not a bad thing, but it's not staying true to the authentic car. However, it was a maintenance thing. These RTR cars, they figure people are just going to run them, never maintain them, never open the shocks, never open the gearbox. And it almost certainly has a gear diff in there. Although I've never opened up a mini JrX2 or JrXT gearbox, I'm almost positive it has a gear diff. Just like the Mini B has a gear diff. So ball diffs are available. If you are so inclined, racing on clay, whatnot. I race it on carpet, so the gear diff is totally fine. Well, there you are, guys. That is the top 10 differences between the mini JrX2, representative of old school vintage buggy, and the Mini B, a miniature version of a very modern state-of-the-art buggy with all of the modern bells and whistles included. Hope you enjoyed that. Thank you for watching. Take care. Bye for now.